All right. Welcome to the Tuesday, August 27th, 2024 Ordinance Revision Committee meeting. As a reminder, ORC is not a decision-making body. We provide directions and advice to city staff for ordinance revisions that will eventually go on to the full commission for consideration. There will be two opportunities for public comment, one at the beginning and one at the end. And persons can speak for up to 3 minutes. Right now is our first opportunity, so you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or if you're calling in by phone, use *9, I think, if you would like to address the ORC. Staff will call on you by name or the last 3 digits of your phone number, and please state your name and address for the record at the beginning of your comments. Do we have any attendees who would like to address us?
We have one attendee, and I have it on good authority that she would like to remain a guest.
All right. Sounds good.
The attendee seems to be our associate planner, Mariana Corcoran.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Okay, then I will close public comment and move on to item 3A on the agenda for discussion on revisions related to the definition of public utility. And I will turn it over to planners DeLeo and Sheikh. I assume you have some sort of presentation for us.
Thank you. I actually do not have a presentation, but I am happy to screen share the I am happy to screen share our memo. This one is 1 page. And I will say this, I will probably be discussing with you the first 3 agenda items, and Julia will be discussing with you the 4th agenda item. Unless Julia, do you want to do 2 and 2? That's okay too.
Let's see how you're feeling after doing the first 2, if you need me to take over. Yeah. And this, just to introduce, this is my unpaid intern who's afraid of thunder. So he will be popping up and down from my lap throughout the meeting.
What's his name?
Athos, A-T-H-O-S.
Oh, cool. Welcome, Athos.
All right. I'll start with a super quick introduction, though. Like previously, we worked with and we sort of presented a loose work plan to chip away at ordinance revisions. This is we are not endeavoring to overhaul the UDC because we think that big structural changes or recommendations for big structural changes probably coming with the comprehensive plan. But we can set ourselves up well by addressing some smaller or medium issues, some cleanup items. We're just trying to set ourselves up for when those recommendations come forth, we can better able to maybe hit the ground running we won't have these smaller issues in the way. And so we sort of triaged and prioritized based on complexity and resources and timing and so forth. And so tonight we've got 3 revisions that staff have identified, well, some combination of staff or the Ordinance Revisions Committee or the Planning Commission. We've got 3 of those. And then we have an actual petition that has been submitted to consider an ordinance amendment. We do allow that. We are not obligated to approve it, but we do allow anyone to submit a petition to amend the UDC. So with that sort of by way of background, let me jump into our first sort of small amendment. It's just a revision to the definition of public utility. If you read it exactly, the word is escaping me, but it's like the oxymoron. The current definition talks about a public utility as being a private enterprise with a franchise for providing a public service. That seems more the definition of private or franchise utility. And what we are suggesting is to change the definition of public utility to match the definition that's in the Public Services Orange Book, which they do not call Orange Book anymore. It is the Public Services Standard Specifications. And then we would insert a definition of franchise or private utility, matching what they, thank you, Julia, matching what they also deal with, consider as franchise or private utilities. Again, this is sort of a cleanup. It's not because it's a it has become a problem, but when you read through the code, this was flagged as something to correct. Any comments, questions? Want a moment to think about it? Commissioner Mills.
Oh, you're taking over my job, Alexis.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. Commissioner
Have
Mills.
I been called on? Is it okay if I speak? Okay, excellent. I think this makes a whole lot of sense, and I'll just flag this is not part of this amendments, but if you come to math, like, you'll know that we should be thinking about including battery energy storage in our zoning ordinance sometime soon. And these are like large batteries that go onto the grid. And it matters a bit in terms of public benefits about whether they're kind of on public utilities or private utilities. And so I think that this actually sets us up really well for that, to start to distinguish between those. So. just
Okay,
for-
good. And so noted.
Any other
Do you-
any
do
other
you think that
comments?
and you do think that as repeated from the standard specification, this works well for that future?
I think it works well. I mean, this is the thing where I just Control F the UDC, and we don't actually say what distinguish differently about whether some are considered essential services and others are not. And that is actually that's important. Oftentimes, just for everybody else's benefit, because I had to dig into this a little bit. Utilities and where they are and what they look like are often exempt from zoning because they are considered essential services.
Mhm.
What is tricky is when you have a power plant that sometimes is owned by the utility, but sometimes is owned by another company. Or what's relevant for Ann Arbor is a battery energy storage system. It just operates a little bit differently in terms of what the anticipated local benefits might be, where it hooks into the grid. And so actually having this distinction, I think will serve us well in the future if we want to wish between which may be exempt or cited or regulated slightly differently. So.
I knew that all along. No, but I do appreciate that insight.
I have a question though, I guess that follows up.
Mhm.
When I did do the Control F in the UDC, there's only like 9 instances of public utility.
Right, and only one of private.
Exactly. So I'm curious about like, if this, and what we have right now in Ann Arbor are franchise or private utilities. Yeah, at least on the electricity side. Sorry, I'm thinking electricity side, not necessarily thinking water side. Our water side is a public utility, but our current electricity system and natural gas system is a franchise. And so I'm just curious if that poses problems by introducing this definition. Now we have identified that we know that there's such a thing as private utility, but we don't necessarily think about that. Anyway, yeah.
I do see your point. And it also, I was thinking similarly. I think that this is going to set us up, and if we want to then change some of our, say, site plan required information, this will ease the path for that. Or if we want to introduce regulations or yes. I don't think that we need to automatically comb through the UDC now and start inserting franchise or private utilities but we have it here and we can start then using it as we streamline or do structural changes or just regular amendments to whatever. And if it comes into play, we are set up well.
Any other commissioners have any thoughts, feedback, comments? All right, thanks for cleaning up this language. And we can move on to 3B about application fee reimbursements, reductions for the provision of affordable housing.
Thank you. Okay, as the name implies, again, I'll take this one. This is also a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of looking ahead. Yep, Julia is all over the screen sharing. I thank you very much. I can only multitask two things, and that will be the third. Our current fee structure, our current code says that you can get 50% of your fees reimbursed when you propose affordable housing dwelling units, period. And we'd like to introduce a little bit of proportion and percentage to that for a developer that is proposing 100% an affordable housing project in its entirety. This will remain the same for them, giving them half of the fees, half of their fees back. But if there is a developer that is proposing some affordable units as part of either a full residential project or even a mixed use project, and then of the residential proposing some of those. So this is giving proportional reimbursement back. We have provided a few examples of how this would look under the current policy.
Alexis, real quick, just with the detail of that, it's set up potentially for confusion because we didn't specify affordable housing provision. Would providing one affordable unit in a 500 unit building qualify? Because we, like in the code as it stands now, we don't specify any threshold. The threshold is affordable housing. Affordable housing units is a term defined in the UDC as up to 60% area median income, but beyond that, there was no actual threshold, whether it was one unit or an entirely affordable. We had no way of differentiating to apply that that refund or reimbursement.
Yeah, so exactly. And in the memo, we provided a couple examples. One example showing if you're an entirely affordable development, you can see that the current policy and proposed policy would have given would have been the same reimbursement. But a project that was loosely based on an existing one, but a project for 181 unit apartment building that had one floor of its 21 of its 20 floors as affordable housing. The current policy would reimburse them half, cutting their $25,000 and change fee to $12,000 something. But the proposed one, because they are providing only 4% of the floor area, they'll get 2% back. And we have a third example of a mixed use project. Again, providing a good amount of affordable housing, but in the big picture, considering the square feet, when you are only providing 6% of your project as affordable housing, you'll get 3% back, not 50% back. Any thoughts or concerns or feedback that I can share with the planning manager?
Commissioner Norton.
I'm just curious if something in particular is prompting this. Like, are you worried that developers are putting one unit in a project to manage to escape fees, or are you just anticipating a problem that could come in the future, or what's motivating this proposed change?
This has not really been a problem, but we are anticipating or trying not to. Since we didn't really get much affordable housing for a long time. This has been an incentive, if you will. Well, not an incentive. I don't think this is the only factor, but this has been available for quite a while as helping affordable housing. But we also it was supporting our premium program, planned unit developments, and so on and so forth. But as we are moving away from the premiums, and this seemed like a good, or we're moving away from premiums, but we are moving into by right projects that might get a height bonus or something with an affordable housing component. And it just as a normal course of review, looking through all of the stuff, we said there's a big, this doesn't seem to be a big mismatch when you have an entire affordable housing project. And that's what we were getting for a while. Only Avalon Housing was developing affordable housing. But as some more projects are coming online, that we are that are having some affordable units, the mismatch just sort of became apparent. No developer has ever said, I have this entire building and I want to put one affordable housing unit in it to get 50% back. But it is a little bit prevention. We don't want someone to game the system that way. Some of these reimbursements may not be a big deal to the development community, but they're a minor deal to us, at least. We are a general fund department.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't have any objections. It seems like a reasonable approach to this. I was just curious if you were having trouble with people trying to game the system. But so I'm in favor of what you're proposing here.
Thanks.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Adams, do you want to
Yeah.
talk about your?
Yeah, I sent around just a swing at a different way of wording it. It's not that the proposed language is bad. It's a difficult concept to word. And I thought tackling it as a formula, which is what it is, instead of with narrative, made it a little bit, not that I think it's ambiguous, but I always think about somebody playing games with it. So it's entirely up to staff and how you want to treat it, but I did send that language around as a thought starter. So we do handle other complicated
Yeah, you had an
things
email?
with charts and other things. So that's another approach.
Oh, I like it. Okay. We will take this under consideration. Planners are not mathematicians, and so we always use words.
I think you could do both.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
You know, not that we're trying to make the EDC longer, but
No, I like it. Thank you for that feedback. That is exactly the purpose of tonight's meeting.
Commissioner Abrams.
Yep, just chiming in to say I support Commissioner Adams' language around the formula. I think that makes it really, really clear.
I'm not seeing the proposal.
I think I'll forward it to you, Dick. I think I sent it to an old list of people on the ORC.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
For the sake of the record, the suggestion was, I'll read it in the email in its entirety. When the proposed development provides affordable housing dwelling units, the applicant shall be entitled to a fee reimbursement. The fee reimbursement shall be calculated in the following manner: total fees paid times the percentage of the developer's floor area dedicated to affordable housing divided by 2.
That's fine.
I also like it. It's a little cleaner. No offense, Alexis.
None taken. It was real code, maybe, but not this.
I'm glad. I was like kind of shocked, I'll say, going through the examples that you gave on like the difference between like what the fee reimbursement would be now versus proposed. So I'm just glad that you've caught this and we're making it more proportional.
Thank you.
All right, barring any other comments on this one, I think we can move on to 3C, which is ordinance revisions related to fence regulations provided in section 5.26.
All right. All right. This has turned into a slightly bigger amendment visually than we first anticipated. This just started as a flag that there is language regarding basically prohibiting barbed wire in commercial districts, but it didn't literally say that in the residential districts. This has never been an issue. No one has ever actually done this, but it does strike you as inequitable. And then once you start maybe clarifying one, then the sweater starts to unravel. We also have our zoning administrators tell us that the current formula for basically picket fences or chain link fences in the front, and then some open slat fences along the side of a building, and then solid fences in the rear. It's difficult to describe. It's difficult for people to apply themselves. It takes a lot of explanation. What is opacity? What is 80% opacity? And so on. So that is an actual change that we are proposing to make to simplify it. We do not think that this will cause a lot of broad-reaching impacts to anyone, but there are a lot of people out in the community who have struggled with complying and who maybe have wanted to do a solid fence along their side property, but this should help moving forward, providing some clarity, a little change, but might have some big administrative impacts. Interested in feedback on that. But our package of changes include applying that prohibition on barbed wire to residential districts, obviously keeping it in the non-residential districts. Same with can't have an electric fence. We would be adding a general requirement and clarifying that fences may be located anywhere on a lot, including abutting the lot line. This is today. This is not an actual change, but this is addressing a lot of questions that we get all the time that our zoning administrator gets about what is the setback of a fence? There is none. This is also increasing the maximum opacity in the side yard for residential districts, going from 80% maximum to 100%. And it's actually decreasing the maximum height permitted in non-residential districts. Current code says that after the first 12 feet, you can just match the height of the district. That could be 30 or 55 feet. No one is actually asking to build a 55-foot fence, but why don't we just keep it at 12 feet in a non-residential district? And so we've come up with a literal reorganization to strike out the current page. It's a one page, just strike it out. And our concept draft is not formatted quite properly. You know, it's not the right font or anything like that, but our concept would be keep the same 3 sections: applicability, standards, and maintenance. Maybe insert a simple table for height and opacity, and have one set of general standards that would apply in all districts. And so, you know, again, so I'll stop there. It is somewhat straightforward. There are just the 2 structural changes. The one is the opacity in residential, and the one is the height in the non-residential.
Commissioner Mills.
Overall, I think the simplicity of this and clarifying, particularly questions that you regularly get, like just put it in the code. I think that helps a lot. I do not like barbed wire at all. However, this is the thing. Again, I don't know. I'm in like energy world. Right now, I don't think that this is tricky. You can't comply with the National Electric Code for a lot of things if you prohibit barbed wire. And so I don't know, like, for example, and recently, currently in our code, things like the substation, we actually, since I've been on Planning Commission, we've approved 2 substations, one on South State and then one on the north side of town. And around those substations, like usually there's some kind of barbed wire on it. So I think that we may need to I like the simplicity, but we may need to carve out, there's something like, unless it's required by some other safety code.
To be honest, I was unaware of that, so I very much appreciate pointing that out.
I've got some language from our soon to be published battery energy storage guide that effectively suggests to communities, like if you want it, like if you similarly have an abhorrence to barbed wire like I do, like here's the thing that you can put in to say is sometimes for some kind of energy infrastructure, for example, for solar, the rule in the National Electric Code is a 6-foot fence with 3 strands of barbed wire or a 7-foot fence. So it's possible. So in this case, this would not run afoul of that. You could still effectively say, you just can't do the barbed wire. You got to do the 7-foot fence. But that's not true, I don't think, for all energy infrastructure. And so substations are an essential part of our, the operation of our grid. And so we should just maybe have some kind of that, other codes carve out.
Commissioner Norton.
I was just going to respond to that. I think providing the exception in as simple language as possible would be good. So something like except when provided otherwise by law, fences shall not contain spikes, nails, or barbed wire or whatever would probably be a good way to deal with that. That was a comment. The question I have is, I believe in the Old West Side where I live, we're not allowed to have fences in the front yard at all because of the historic district requirements. Is that true? And how does that fit, or how does that jive with this provision allowing fences anywhere?
It's my understanding that there's not a prohibition on fences in historic districts. I do know you cannot have a split rail fence. I think that the historic district, they need approval for a fence. You need approval for a fence. I think that it is possible that you can only have a fence if you can provide evidence that the property had a fence before, maybe or maybe not. Oh, one of our guest speakers knows this. Before I let Mariana chime in, I will say this. Regarding the front yard, this is not there is no actual change. This is just rewording of the existing code. And so it's been working with the historic district guidelines previously, and I anticipate it would work just the same again. Mariana.
I guess I would say if you're trying to clean up confusion and you're making these changes, why not just reference, except as provided in historic districts, Just a thought.
Okay. I have allowed Mariana to talk. Mariana, you can unmute yourself and identify yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Would you like to be promoted?
No, it's fine. I'll just say quickly. So the regulations for fences in the historic district, when it comes to staff approvals, as staff, we can only approve fences that are along the lot lines. And it's 3 feet in the front yard and then 6 feet in the backyard. So if you want to do more than that, you can. Or if you want them to be not along the lot line, you can, but that requires the application actually to the commission. You can't just get a staff approval for those kinds of things. And same thing with opacity. I forget the exact, we have our own opacity standards as well. And it just is a matter of what staff can approve and what you would have to go to the commission.
Or maybe, Alex, the other way to approach this is where there are other sections that are relevant. You often put flags in like subject to section yada, yada, yada. Here are the requirements. So you might at least add a cross-reference to those provisions so that someone knows they're there and they have to go through extra steps. Again, it just seems to me if you're taking steps to provide clarity in the ordinance and make sure things are coherent and consistent, and you're going to make these changes, you might as well provide that clarification as well. Again, just a suggestion.
No, I appreciate the suggestion. I've made a note of a footnote. That does provide, thank you, purpose of the meeting, more eyes on the concept and the draft language, and I do agree that a footnote would probably be helpful.
Commissioner Abrams.
I might be wrong about this. I don't live in a historic district, but my understanding would be that there are a lot of ways in which the historic district is more restrictive than the general code for other things like accessory structures or front yard. You couldn't do like front yard solar on the Old West Side. So I guess I'm wondering, maybe there's a general understanding that the historic district just supersedes anything else, right? Like across the board. I don't know if we need to put it in at each relevant moment, but maybe it just, for you, Alexis, just some verification when this comes to the full commission, or just confirmation about how it relates generally, the historic district guidelines relate generally to the UDC would be helpful.
Appreciate all of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with Jill Thatcher, our historic district coordinator, and Mariana Mellon Corcoran, who is another associate planner, also working about half the time with the historic district administration. So I'm going to work with the two of them, and you'll see whatever it is we end up doing, you'll see it reflected. I'll probably call it out specifically, at least as a discussion item, as this moves through in the amendment process.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more context, like at least 3 to 5 days a week, I'm referencing the sign ordinance, the sign code, because I handle our sign permits to make sure that they're conforming to like the zoning specific regulations and stuff. And I know it's a relatively new ordinance, and there are a little bit more specific standards regarding illumination and how signs can be like mounted in certain sign structures in the historic districts, but in that part of the code too. So yeah, that is a good point. There's probably a number of instances within the code where there's an extra restrictive set of regulations within the historic districts, like above and beyond what is like generally allowed in the UDC. And just like the sign part is another example of that.
Comments from any other commissioners? I just have two clarifications maybe. Alexis, you said at the beginning this would have big administrative impacts, and my assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you meant in like a positive way, like this would clarify everything and just be easier for zoning officials or planners to explain this code to people wanting to put in fences?
Yes, that is what I meant. We feel that like the new presentation format will help a lot. Adding in the part, the general standard that fences can be located anywhere on the lot, which is not a change, but it's just articulating it right there. And then the structural or the substantive change to change the opacity will help make it a little more intuitive, a little bit easier to understand what we're trying to regulate, and for someone to figure out if their idea complies or not. We'll still probably get a ton of phone calls, but we think that these little changes will have a big bang for user friendliness.
Someone who's probably going to have to put in a fence soon to get some dog that my husband promised my kids. This is very helpful. Now, not knowing much about fences.
Tell me your answer, and I'll put an exception there for you.
Thanks.
And just wanted to add too, from an enforcement standpoint too, I know our zoning administrator gets, I don't know how frequently, but it's not uncommon for him to get complaints about, fences and like, where it's sitting, like on property lines, or, it's too tall or and oftentimes has to go out to, check those things to resolve potential disputes.
Oh, good. This should help with that. Thank God nobody's putting up those 30-foot tall fences that they would have been allowed to do. My other question, just under that general 2, fences shall not contain spikes, nails, barbs. I assume that means like sticking up. Like, don't some fences, like you actually have to put nails in them to keep them together, like wooden fences? I don't know anything about fences really, but I feel like I used to have a fence that had like nails in it, and I assume that's not what you mean.
That phrase comes exactly from the current code, and the way I read it, shall not contain those things,
like pointing,
like
right?
Or any sharp points. I think they mean sticking up, used for sort of deterrent purposes. I don't think we're saying that you have to glue your fence together.
I don't think so either, but I'm wondering if it's worth trying to sneak in a couple more words that are like pointing vertically or something like that. Not because, you know,
Protruding
might-
nails or something like that.
Ooh, protruding nails.
good word. Okay. Shall we move on? You good with this one, Alexis?
Yeah.
We are now on, where are we? 3D, ordinance revisions related to the zoning districts in which childcare centers and private schools are allowed. In table 5.15-1, and I believe that this was a petitioner requested thing,
Yes.
but staff will present on it.
Yes, this was, I just closed 1 second. I'll pull up. So we have a visual. Yes, this was petitioner submitted. So based on our code, we do allow petitioners to submit suggested revisions that staff then receives and researches and contextualizes and moves forward with suggestions based on that. And there's no direction that we have to move forward exactly with, direction in the UDC that we have to move forward directly with the exact proposed language or some version of it. So we kind of take those steps to analyze it in the context of the city, in the context of the UDC, the comprehensive plan, etc. So the proposed amendment was requesting childcare centers and private schools to be permitted uses. So not, and recall that like these uses along like lots of other uses, in some cases they're not allowed, in some cases they're allowed as via special exception use, or some cases they're just permitted outright. So the text amendment requested that childcare centers and private schools as permitted uses in the research and M1, M1A zoning districts. Just another little like context point. Our code has a distinction which is pretty much the most advanced, doing a little bit of peer like comparison. Like childcare centers are the largest. So we have, and I'm going to mess up the names because the names are so similar. Family childcare centers, we have 3 distinctions. So one is like up to 4, up to 6 kids and can be at a house. One is from 7 to 12, which is kind of a medium size, and the childcare centers are for the largest centers, from 12 and above students. I mean, conceivably could have less than that, but so this is for the highest of those child care facility classifications. So the proposed change was to allow both of these, again, as permitted uses in the research and M1, M1A zoning districts. So after staff's analysis, we actually like looked back because as it stands now, childcare centers are a special exception use in the research, the ORL districts, and not allowed in the research districts. And private schools are not allowed in either of but already allowed in M1 districts. So that part of the request we didn't actually need to address, because they were already allowed as a permitted use for childcare centers in M1 districts. Private schools, indeed, not originally allowed in those districts. After staff analysis and kind of researching and looking at older versions of the code in 2019 was the newest version of the UDC. So there was a process called Zorroing that some of you that have been with the commission or following Ann Arbor planning news and ordinance changes for a while, moved around chapters and reorganized, essentially, or came up with the UDC as like one unified chapter. That like the first version of the UDC was after 2019, I believe, right, Alexis? So we looked back in some of those old versions of code, and one thing that you'll notice, like if you're like a planning historian, our old code followed the kind of and everything included in the X district model. So it was like cumulative, and which the new version of UDC is very independent. So the old version of the code would say, you know, in an M1 district, everything that's included, or M2 would allow everything in M1, and in M2, X, Y, Z, and everything in M1. Or like an R4 would allow, you know, everything in R3, 2, 1. So our old code was in that kind of cumulative building format, and our new code is more independent, like treats each zoning district more independently, although there's a lot of overlap, but it doesn't have that kind of cumulative language in it. So looking back at that, childcare centers were actually a permitted use as special, or were a special exception use in research zoning districts back before that whole version, rewrite. So essentially, because it's been so long, it's not, we can't consider it a text error. So decided that it should be re-included, and not as a special exception, but as a permitted use in the research district. So focusing on childcare centers specifically. Changing in the ORL, because the logic that we had, research and ORL in practice are very similar districts. And if childcare centers are allowed as a permitted, not special exception, but permitted use, barring some specific standards that are in a different section and have to be certified and everything at the state level. But if there are permitted use in M1 and M2 districts, which are already more intensive or potentially, you know, noxious, they should be included as permitted and not special exception uses in the research and ORL districts. So it would boost up from being a special exception use to a permitted use in ORL, and having that parallel in research districts, which does also meet the request, or, you know, that is within the lines of the request, the petitioner request. In private school consideration, the request, the text amendment request, recall, was M1 and research districts. Staff decided not to suggest including it within the M1 districts, but to include it in research and also in the ORL district as a special exception use, because of the alignment between those districts. Why did staff not suggest including it in the M1 district? Looking at the typical footprint of a private school and the relatively low land area dedicated to M1 uses within the city, staff was reluctant to suggest that, and that's why we're bringing it here for discussion, to suggest that because of the comparatively large footprints of private schools and comparatively low amount of M1 districts in the area, and given that like private schools are more likely to have larger outdoor facilities adjacent to those other, you know, potentially, I mean, we're not, you know, manufacturing steel in Ann Arbor, but you know, where the one area within the city where any of those types of uses could potentially be zoned, not allowing it in those types of M1 districts. And the other consideration we had, and not allowing it like outright as a permitted use in research and ORL, and again, not allowing it in M1 districts. Ann Arbor, and it'll be interesting because this is something that's coming up in some of the comprehensive plan discussions. I mean, Ann Arbor's like industry in general has changed, and Ann Arbor's industrial uses are not, and not heavy manufacturing typically. At most, it might be an alternative technology facility for automobiles that might have a small garage there where they're pulling off data from the cars and like, but not sitting there running cars for 8 hours, but like the car might be running for a little bit to pull off data from some sort of hybrid technology or testing new modules or something in a car. So we have relatively small amounts of these land areas in general within the city, research, ORL, and M1. And these are the types of areas where we see a lot of spin-off technologies from the university. And the university has some areas like innovation districts that they put forth in their long-range plan. And these are the types of areas where any of these types of innovative or spin-off technologies, both from the university and from what has driven Ann Arbor's, a lot of Ann Arbor's industrial or like post-industrial industry growth over the past 20 to 30 years. So thinking about that context, like because it's such a relatively, these zoning districts are such a relatively small area of the city, leaving this use out with the caveat that, as the comprehensive plan process moves forward, we likely won't be seeing this table, in the somewhat near future with our 30+ zoning districts. But at this point, staff felt comfortable, but I want to open it up for discussion, moving forward with these recommendations. I know I covered a lot of ground. Let me know if you have any questions or go back to something.
Question, Ellie?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in this question about the use of M1, and I understand the rationale, but I'm also aware that all of these other kinds of educational institutions are permitted, not even special exception, but permitted uses in the M1. So I'm wondering, maybe just together we can think through the rationale. Like, I can see like not allowing, I can see the hesitation about allowing more of these kinds of things on those in that zoning district where there are many things that are only allowed or only, limited to that in one or two other districts. However, it seems, yeah, maybe do we want to be more restrictive for the other kinds of educational uses, I guess? Like, I'm not exactly sure how to square that.
And I didn't jump too far into that part of the research, but my understanding is that because public universities and public schools are allowed in all zoning districts. And I'm not quite sure, Alexis probably knows more of this history than I do, but I think that comes from some of the basis of like independent government jurisdictional capacities. So like, when the university buys a piece of land, they don't, or when develops a piece of land, we don't even see the development process because it is a separate government entity and like quasi-independent. So I think that basis for those, like, at least originated both the school district and the school district also, we don't see site plans for their
That makes
development
sense to me.
projects.
I guess maybe, yeah, so maybe you're right. So being more specific, why would we allow private institutions of higher learning in M1 district, but not private school?
That's definitely a fair question.
So, and maybe one could make the case, yeah, so I don't know, maybe it's just, yeah, I'll throw it out there. I don't have a conclusion to draw from that, but.
Alexis, did you have a comment?
I was gonna, it moved on, I was only gonna agree and possibly attempt to clarify. Like, for example, the University of Michigan is a state, it's an arm of the state. State trumps cities in the state of Michigan. And K-12 schools, or like AAPS, is a creature of the state that is higher than just the city. So they are exempt from zoning. We have institutions of higher learning public and the public schools, meaning K-12 in there. It doesn't matter if we entirely take the row out. We have no jurisdiction over them. We do have jurisdiction though, and charter schools are also creatures of the State Board of Education, but we do have full land use control over private education schools.
Yeah, maybe I just was looking and it's, so we also permit trade schools. So trade schools and private institutions of higher learning, we would be saying, but not private schools.
Yeah, if somehow the trade school was a public trade school, I am not as familiar with this whole realm of but if somehow it was a chartered by the state or the Washtenaw Intermediate School District or Ann Arbor Public Schools, then they would just fall under that public category. But if it's a for-profit private trade school, then we would treat it like a business.
Thinking about, traditionally the trade schools had some manufacturing, there was like welding and auto shop and, maybe aircraft repair and those types of things. That might be the underlying logic historically. But yeah, those are fair points, like comparatively in today's context. Thank you, Commissioner Abrams.
Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, in looking at the Sorry. Am I good? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it might be unstable. Okay. In looking at the table, I think I understand the rationale about we don't have tons of area in M1 districts, and so maybe we need to protect it. But I do think that looking at how we treat some of the other schools, and yeah, the trade, I could totally see like that makes sense. It might be tied to manufacturing, and so having that one. But since the existing code does allow it in the institutions of private learning, of higher learning that are private in those districts, I think it's difficult to justify why we don't let private schools there. So I think that that's the case for at least having some process, and I could be cool with special exception use, but at least some process by which you could consider whether an M district is appropriate for a private school. I think, again, there's a whole lot of P's in that table, in that section. And so like, I don't feel super strongly personally about special exceptions. On the childcare stuff, I think that that makes a lot of sense. And I know maybe it is too late to be a Scrivener's error, but that's just very reasonable. If that's what, like, if it used to be there, like making it there again. And I recognize that it's actually a liberalization. I don't know if that's the right word, of the code to effectively go from what's a special exception use to a full land use. But this is one of the things that's like a huge, there's a demonstrated need, like, and it's not just here. And so more opportunities for childcare centers, I think it, especially in a city that aims to grow too, I think it is really, really important. And so making it easier rather than harder to have childcare centers, I think would behoove us. So
Doing just a little bit more context. I was doing a little bit of like background research and stuff, and I think like A2 Spark has been like pushing for opening up childcare centers in more areas like in Washington and Livingston, and like most of our code actually like goes beyond their suggestions to begin with. So congratulations to Ann Arbor once again. And this would even like push it further than like their ideal. I didn't take the time to look at some of our neighboring cities and townships and stuff, but I think we're already pretty progressive as far as being permissive for childcare centers and even the other two childcare facility classifications as well.
Commissioner Norton.
I'm puzzling through this. I'm wondering a couple of things. Do you know, are there any private institutions of higher learning currently situated within an M1, M1A, or M2 district?
I think our only private, we can brainstorm for 5 seconds. I think the only ones that we currently have are Concordia and I think it might only be Concordia within the city limits, and that is in a residential district. Actually, they're special exception used in an R district.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering, rather than adding private school into a industrial district, why not take out private institution of higher learning and go that direction? And then that leads to my follow-on thought, which is, it seems to me like we're starting to get pretty far into changing uses that maybe we should hold off on pending the completion of the comprehensive plan. Particularly the schools. I get the public schools there's a court decision way back when that basically exempted public schools from local zoning. Their interpretation of the MZEA. But that's the conventional accepted norm. So setting them aside, it's not clear to me why, particularly if there aren't any higher institutions of private learning in an industrial district, why we would keep that there, and why would we go in the direction of making private schools there. Childcare centers, I can see a more pressing need to maybe deal with now. I'm not getting why private schools merit that kind of attention. And then the other question I have is, there's a mismatch in the terminology here. When I look at the code, there's private school, public school, and then trade industrial school. Well, is that a private trade industrial school or a public trade industrial school. It's like apples and oranges in the use of terminology that is confusing here. So I guess where I'm headed is maybe suggesting to set aside the school changes for now. Just address the childcare provisions you're sorting through, and then kick the schools issue over to the comprehensive planning committee to say, pay attention to this as we're reworking the comprehensive plan. That would be that's my 2 cents on this.
Any other feedback, questions? Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
This is just the follow on to that. Like that logic makes sense to me, especially, yeah, especially in the M districts with the institutions of higher learning private. The only amendment that I might give, or like thought that I might give, is that if in 2019 we had private schools as a special exception use in the research districts, I'm pretty sure it was not, I mean, what we hear from staff report and like being around for Zero, that was not intentional that it got left out of this table. And so restoring that, which is what I think the proposal does for those E's, makes sense. Not expanding it, I think in light of comprehensive plan review is wise, but restoring that I think is not a terrible idea, or something to be considered at least.
I'll just agree with that. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Abrams. I'll just have
Oh,
the last word.
Just a really small comment, which is, I just want to clarify. So restoring, we're speaking really just about RE and ORL districts, not M1, right? Okay, so we would be,
Technically,
also
Commissioner
the-
Abrams, technically speaking, RE districts, the ORL district is actually a little bit newer, I believe, than the research, but given the like overarching similarities between the two.
yeah, so yeah, I guess when it comes to the table, we'll need to be really clear which districts, but I think what we're saying is not loosening the restriction on the M1. That's what you're proposing, Commissioner Mills, right? Okay. Sorry, Sarah.
Maybe
Oh,
I'm sorry, maybe I was speaking out of turn, because I see now that you're not proposing to put private schools into M1 districts, but it's just got me
Text
questioning,
amendment. Yeah, no, it's a lot of
why do
layers,
we have
Commissioner Norton.
private institutions in them in the first place?
The text amendment was requesting private schools in M1 and research.
Right,
So
okay.
that's the basis for us opening up this can of worms, so to speak.
Yeah.
I agree with what was.
Yeah, I was just,
Go
I
ahead.
would urge for the definitions to point out that there's some confusion about trade schools. It doesn't clarify if they're public or private or both. Since there's other distinctions made. Sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay. Thank you, Commissioner Abrams, for clarifying what I was also understanding from Commissioner Mills, just like extra clarifying it. I'm on board with Child Care Center, and I think I would need to understand a little bit more the rationale from the petitioner why they would want private schools to be a permitted use. Because I think just restoring this for now makes the most sense to me. I don't necessarily agree that we need to permit them in M1 districts when they're permitted in a lot of other districts already, and now can be special exceptions in RE and ORL once we restore it. Any last burning thoughts?
Can you just repeat that just so I can like take down that note?
It wasn't, I don't know, what did I think I agree. I agreed with like your entire assessment, I think is what I was saying. Like, I think like the petitioner's argument when I read it back for wanting it to be a permitted use in M1, like because it's already permitted, the schools, the private schools, it's already permitted in so many other districts, and it can, it's allowed as by special exception in other districts, and now we're going to restore the special exception for RE and ORL. I'm not convinced that we need it to be a permitted use. necessarily. We have really great public schools here that need as many kids as possible. And I'm assuming when they say private schools, they mean like K-12, because higher learning is higher learning. I'm just going to assume that.
The definition includes dance schools. Oddly
Wait,
enough.
really?
The definition on page 284 of the UDC is dance schools and art schools, but not trade schools.
Okay, that's interesting. Like that actually a little bit might change my way of thinking. Thank you, Commissioner Mills, because I mean, my kids' dance school is like kind of in like an industrial office park. And sometimes that's okay. Well, I'm gonna need to noodle on that a little more. Can we make sure when this
Good.
comes to full commission that we like unpack the definition?
Yeah, I was going to insert myself and say, I think we all need to noodle, and maybe the better answer is to adjust the definitions, because I think there's a fundamental difference between a K-12 or an arts school or a dance school. Like, it's not the same. So noodling is.
Commissioner Abrams.
Just Commissioner Mills sharing that made me just go Control F dance in the UGC. But what I saw right away is when we're talking about proximity to schools for marijuana facilities, we exclude dance and art schools from having to abide by that restriction. So I think we are opening a bit of a can of worms here, but maybe the near term things we can agree on is that childcare centers, yes, permitted use in RE and ORL, and private schools except special exception in RE and ORL. And otherwise, maybe we need to look at the definition of trade school. Does it need to be clarified public-private, and look at the definition of private school? So we're kind of like closing the loop on one thing, but we've opened it on another, if that makes any sense.
But that's a huge distinction to make. Like when I think of a K through 12 private school versus like a small dance studio, that's like essentially a small business. Like,
yeah, we may want to disconnect those.
Yep.
But not tonight.
No. Hey, we gave you guys more work to do. Alexis is like, I'm used to it. Okay, was that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I'm just looking at Commissioner Mills mentioned something, and I'm just curious. Mentioned something within the definition of private schools that it excludes trade schools. I'm just curious about that.
There's no definition for trade schools, for what it's worth. Also, based on what was talked about before, charter schools are considered public schools.
All right, staff, anything else from you guys?
I'm just for very clear, although Commissioner Norton was kind of like, maybe we should not move this forward. I am hearing general consensus on continuing to move forward with this petition. And I hear a lot more support for the childcare uses and lesser support for the K-12, but nobody said this should not move past this, the committee. Nobody said it dies in committee. That's correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's perfectly fine. Just wanted to make sure to cross that T.
I think in effect, I gave you another reason to not put forward the petitioner's requests to put private schools in M districts, because that seems to me to be a bigger change. If they used to be allowed by exception in RE districts, then I'm okay with going along with restoring that to be consistent.
Yeah. I guess I should clarify. I don't think we actually can say this does not move out of committee, for lack of a better term, but we are not obligated to support it. We are not, they paid their fee, they are entitled to their public hearing. But the outcome is fully our jurisdiction. So, but I am hearing like some support. This will help when we formulate our staff report, when we do our final analysis and put together our arguments. This will help inform our recommendation as well.
And it's at that point that in Commissioner Proposed Business, we can say, hey, maybe we want to look at dance schools. Like,
Yes.
so that we can formally add it to the work plan in case, unless you want to take it up between now and then, but.
Well, I mean, we'll definitely noodle on it. I'm going to be noodling on things for weeks now. Or telling everyone I'm noodling on things. We'll see, like this may fall under the category of for best clarity, for best articulating what we do permit and don't permit. It's worth at least a conversation. So we will at least discuss and we'll see what happens.
When this comes to the full commission, does the petitioner come along with it, or only if they choose to? Because I remember they did the last time they proposed something for TC1.
Yeah, I actually extended a request to not a request, an invitation to the petitioner to come to like on a couple email exchanges to come to our meetings and let them know that it was coming up for ORC this or today, discussing it, the agenda, send them a link to the agenda and said you're more than welcome to come and like can prepare even an informal 5 to 10 minute presentation, but did not get a response to those emails. But the same offer will be extended as it moves forward.
Okay. I mean, I think it would be helpful to hear. I mean, I'm just making assumptions, but like they're probably not talking about a K-12 school, and they might be talking about like a dance school. It would just be interesting to hear how this came up for them. Like TC1. Okay. And I think we're good. All right, this is our last opportunity for public comment, but I'm guessing that since no one else has joined.
Yeah, no one else has joined, so I don't think we have any public commentary.
Yep. All right, then we're adjourned. 8:07. Good job, guys.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.